District. I farm down south of Glenwood. And, glad to be here this morning.
And Lyle Coonan from Clark City. I'm a member of the Minnesota Senate and represent District 17, which includes Candy, Ojai, Renville, Chippewa, and Swift counties. And most of my life I was a dairy farmer.
Ed Bolus, I'm at Diecast Specialties in Starbuck. I'm also a board member and also on the legislative committee here. Our panel, and one more introduction.
Mary Cranston, representing this lovely area up into Ottertail. 2 kids out there, so if you hear any more screaming, that shouldn't happen because I think I banished one into this room, so. Somewhere.
That's how we all got to be good people. Why don't we start with a brief statement from each of the representatives here. Whatever you'd like to talk about is fine, and then we can open it up to questions. So, you want to start?
Okay, I'll start. In the Senate, I had what I considered some pretty good committee assignments. I was appointed to the full tax committee, the tax reform committee, agriculture and rural development, and environment and energy. So that's the areas I worked in. The Ag Committee and the Environment and Energy Committee were policy committees. This year we got through the session on time. Of course, it ran right up to midnight, but we did make it. The tax bill, and I found this to be my experience as during the years I've been in the legislature. I just finished my 11th session, so I've gone through this 11 times. But the tax bill has what I consider some good things in it, some things I'm not real happy about, and that's kind of the usual thing when you go through a session. In the compromise at the end, that's where you end up. And we can talk about that a little more. But I'll just mention now that some of the business to business, which Governor Dayton had promoted early on, and I understand what he was up to when he was, trying to reform part of tax reform, broadening the base and lowering the rate. But business to business, I personally have trouble with because of the pyramiding or the effect of the cost being built into the product or service as you move along. But we can talk about that a little more as we move along here. But during the session, we did put more money into education, which I think is a good thing. I would like to see Minnesota in a position to compete for the world's best jobs, and to do that, I think we need a very well trained and educated workforce. I do think, and this is my opinion, I do believe, however, that we are lacking a little bit in technical training, both in high school and in some cases in courses in the 2-year schools afterwards. But we can talk about that a little more as we go along too. But I was glad to see that there's more money going into education. And I'll let these people make a statement. Thanks.
Where do we start? I'm of the opposite party as Lyle is. I have a little bit different take on it. The session for me was frustrating in the sense that elections have consequences, and the Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and they did what they intended to do, I think. And some of the things, like Lam mentioned, the increase in education funding is good, but the overall funding mechanism, I thought, was an overreach. The $2 billion tax increase. In my area of interest or expertise are agriculture and education, and the taxes increases are concerning. The tax increase that the governor says now he's going to repeal, or would go along with repealing the sales tax on farm repairs. It should never have been put in place in the first place. The end of session, like Lyle mentioned, it gets pretty hectic. And in the House, we got that bill, that thick tax bill, Sunday night about 8 o'clock, and they passed it yet that evening, I think it was. And a couple of things in there were a bit surprising. That was one of them. The other was the tax on commercial storage, which I guess they're also talking about repealing before it takes effect next April. So a couple of those things, you kind of have to wonder why they were put there in the first place, and now with the repeal of those, the tax on farm repairs is about a $28 million per year revenue stream for the state. So if that's repealed in our special session next month, there's going to be that hole, which I think they're saying there's enough money in the budget to cover that without increasing any other taxes. But if the tax on commercial storage is repealed next session, that's about a $70 or $80 million, again, revenue piece for the state. And again, we'll have to see if that can be covered without any additional tax increase or some kind of a spending decrease. So those are things that we're going to have to see coming down the road. And the other thing that I would mention, a change this session that hasn't been really talked about much, were some changes made to the gift tax and the estate tax in Minnesota. And Minnesota is really kind of an outlier here. Only 15 states in the country have an estate tax or gift tax anymore. Most states dropped that when the feds quit giving states a credit for the estate tax. We have a $1 million exemption, which for qualified farms and small businesses has been kicked up to $5 million. But the changes here was in the gift tax, where any gift over $14,000 a year is going to be subject to a flat 10% tax. There's a $1 million exemption, lifetime exemption. However, the kicker is there's now a 3-year clawback period. And that could have a huge impact on anybody who's done some estate planning. I just talked to a CPA over the weekend. They had done planning based on last year's rules. And if there's no changes made, it's going to cost his client's family about $400,000 in additional state taxes because of this 3-year clawback period. So that's a big issue for those that it affects. Farmers especially may have estates of that size, the price of land and such. So I think we need to address that again as well. Hopefully we can do that, if not in the special session, then back in the session next year. Mary?
Where do I start? I've got 2 pages of notes, so I hope I get to go through them all today. I won't bore you with the details right now. So yes, I obviously do not, we got the 2 outliers there. So I'm on the same party as Paul, a Republican, so I see things just a little differently. K-12 education, like Senator Stumpf said, yes, the Democrats did put a lot of money into K-12 investment. Greater Minnesota isn't going to see a lot of those benefits because the money goes down to Minneapolis, St. Paul. No shock there. There's talk, like Representative Anderson said, of a special session in September. I like to golf, so I'm calling it the Mulligan session because there's going to be hopefully some repeals of some bad things that had happened. You're going to hear, and you are probably hearing Governor Dayton saying that he didn't know what was in the bill when he signed the bill. I don't believe that is a really good leadership quality in Governor Dayton. He did sign the bill. He does have an obligation to know what exactly is in the bill and how it's going to affect Minnesotans, especially when on the House floor during debates, these kind of things were questioned and brought into the public. So excited for these repeals, and I really hope that Governor Dayton does stick to his word because it is not good stuff. Upfront capital equipment sales tax exemption, you guys are all familiar with that. I want to let you know that is one of my bills, one of my very 2 bills that I got passed. Yay. The other bill that I got passed was to allow Panther Distillery to do sampling of their whiskey products on site. So if you haven't visited Panther Distillery, I urge you to visit. And I like to tease my counterparts in my party saying I got more bills passed with the Democrats in control than I did when my own party was in control.
Way to go, boys.
A sales tax, or I should say income tax, sales tax projection, the forecast. Government runs on forecasts like how much money they believe is going to be brought in so they can determine how much they're going to spend of your money. With the Democrats in control, they raised over $2.1 billion worth of taxes, fees, and all surcharges and that good stuff. That obviously is concerning because you're making a projection.